Let's begin. Our first speaker is code 4142. The title of the speech, Seeing is Believing.
I have some bad news. The centennial champion of informative speaking will not have the best speech. Are you feeling disoriented right now? A little frustrated? That's because your brain is looking for visual cues. UCLA professor Dr. Albert Mehrabian finds that when it comes to communication, only 7% of how we are perceived is based on what we say. For the other 93%, we can thank our eyes. That's why informative speaking is the fastest growing event. It's the only one with visual aids, and our brains are designed for visual information. I'm not going to say that original oratory is for losers. Dr. Say of University College London dug into this conundrum when he asked musical experts to correctly identify the winners of a past music competition based on audio recordings. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. They couldn't do it. Then he added a visual component. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. They still couldn't do it. But when the recordings were silent, shh, no sound, just sight, they correctly identified the winners of a music competition. He writes, the results highlight our natural, automatic, and non-conscious reliance on visual cues, even when sound is consciously viewed as the core domain content. So, I'll be addressing my speech to your eyes today. Keep them open wide because they've got a lot to see. First, we'll pull back the curtain on how they work and why they're so biologically dominant. Then, we'll be able to scrutinize the role of vision in the digital era, before finally discovering how our greatest strength has been weaponized against us. Because, like naive children, our eyes will believe everything they see. So, let's zoom in on the physical mechanics of sight. The human eye is the size of a ping pong ball, has over 2 million parts, and works like a camera. First, light reflects off an object and enters the eye through the cornea and pupil, where it's projected onto the retina at the back of the eye. There, the image travels through the optic nerve to the occipital lobe at the back of your skull. That's how you can distinguish nuances, like depth, distance, color, objects, and even faces. And it sticks. Over 80% of all memories are learned through our eyes. Dr. John Medina, a molecular biologist, notes that if we hear a piece of information, we'll remember only 10% of it 3 days later. But add a picture, and that number shoots up to 65%. Let's put this into perspective. Visually, of course. Smell takes up 0.01% of the brain. Taste, 3%. Touch and hearing, 8% each. Vision, on the other hand, takes up a whopping 50%. And because of this, vision also has something else on its side. Blazing hot NASCAR speed. MIT neuroscientists claim that the human eye can process visual information in under 13 milliseconds. From an evolutionary perspective, this speed has saved us. If we returned home to our cave to see a mountain lion waiting for us, no thinking was required, we ran. Even today, when we're driving down the highway, going 90 miles per hour, which as a new driver, I would never do, because I respect all traffic regulations, but if you were to do that, then bam, a 5-car pileup. It's swerve or die. No time for conscious judgment. We see it, we believe it, we live. That's how our brain has kept us alive. Now, in 1 second, our eye is capable of feeding our occipital lobe 11 million bits of information. But our conscious awareness can only process 40 bits of that information. When we lived in caves, this worked. There's not a whole lot to see. But in the digital era, the average person spends 186 minutes per day on social media. Neuroscientist Susana Martinez-Conde estimates that for our brain to process all of the information it takes in, it would need to be bigger than a building. And that still wouldn't be enough. This is where the illusory truth effect comes in. When we are repeatedly shown false information, even if we know it's not true, our brain begins to accept it. This follows the rule of 7. We see it, 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 we see it. We believe it. It happens that fast. The most maniacal criminal couldn't have conceived of a tool more perfectly crafted to accomplish this task than the internet. In Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler wrote that slogans should be persistently repeated until the very last individual has come to grasp the idea. Imagine what he would have done with the internet at his disposal. Or maybe we don't need to. Our eyeball, a wonder so perfectly crafted to keep us alive, has become the ultimate biological loophole, a weapon that can be wielded against us, and the implications are deadly. Take 16-year-old Mason Edens, who turned to TikTok after a bad breakup. In his troubled mental state, the site deluged him with videos of a rapper who had committed suicide after his own breakup. In his case, see, believe, live became see, believe, die. And unfortunately, Mason is one of many. This chart shows when popular social media sites rose to prominence. This is teenage suicide rates over the same period. The CDC reports a 67% increase from 2007 to 2021. Statistics like these aren't something we can just unsee. But this impacts our political system too. In 2015, a group of anti-abortion activists released a heavily edited video that purposely misled viewers into believing that Planned Parenthood trafficked fetal tissue for profit. The widespread outrage led the US House of Representatives to freeze Planned Parenthood's funding. And only weeks later, a man in Colorado walked into a Planned Parenthood and fatally shot 3 people. This is just one example of how our vision was used against us to incite widespread public skepticism, discouraging policymakers from taking action, resulting in budget cuts. But I've seen the tangible effects of this firsthand. Look at these. Have you seen any of them before? Every single one is false. Misinformation surrounding climate change is rampant on the internet. I live in Pasadena, California, and a few short months ago, I was shaken awake in the middle of the night. We fled our home with flames burning moments away. Thankfully, my home was saved, but many of my friends were not so lucky. Before the fire, Chief Crawley warned that an $18 million budget cut hindered her department's ability to respond to large-scale emergencies. There are real-world consequences to our eyes being exposed to misinformation, and my community paid the price. Meta recently announced that it's ending its fact-checking service, meaning our eyes are more vulnerable now than ever. The time has come for us to install an update. Take control of your sight, and your mind will follow. That was a lot of talking. You know, in my favorite movie, Love Actually, a man confesses his love without speaking. He understands the power of sight. So, shh, tell your brain it's Christmas carolers.
Our second speaker is code 4196. The title of the speech, Mommy Issues.
I've been called mommy many times in my life. And hey, before you get any weird ideas, let me explain. This book, well, its title, Are You My Mother, has caused quite the controversy in my household. Because this question gets asked by these little guys, an occurrence that haunts my nightmares. But let's cut my little brothers some slack, because sometimes even I'm confused on how to answer their question. Parentification. is defined by psychology today as a role reversal in families, in which the child acts like an adult within the familial system. Parentification seems to be a pretty taboo subject, as it isn't largely considered in conversations surrounding development or behaviors. Yet according to the National Alliance for Caregiving, nearly 1.4 million American children are experiencing parentification today. I've been controlling the chaos of toddlers for a while now, or at least I've been trying to. And my life has changed so much over the last few years. I and many others would like to be able to share our stories, stresses and all, and be met with understanding. So today, let's discover why parentification exists, then its effects on an individual's childhood, before finally, what that means for the parentified child when forming connections. Since the dawn of time, mankind has always wanted to find someone to take care of them. And hey, if you're still looking for that special someone, you know where to find me. But much like that urge, the concept of parentification has always existed. But it wasn't originally recognized as something psychological. According to the National Institute of Health, ethnic differences in rates of parentification stem from cultural values embraced by each group, as well as the ecological challenges that they may face. For example, within the Latino community, there's a concept called familismo, which centers around strong family loyalty. But familismo is so much more than just being close to your parents or siblings. It's about striving for individual success for the benefit of your relatives. Similarly, within Chinese culture, there's a concept called xiao, or filial piety. This is a Confucian concept that stresses the idea that it is the child's responsibility to support and succeed the parents. So within certain cultural contexts, parentification is a mere way of showing love and dedication towards your family members. And while cultural traditions are important in these conversations, financial pressures often push kids into parental roles out of sheer necessity. According to the National Database of Childcare Prices, childcare costs are astronomically high and unattainable for families throughout the country. When ranked, the top 4 regions with the highest annual cost of childcare are Minnesota at $16,000, California at almost $17,000, Massachusetts at nearly $21,000, and Washington, D.C. at over $24,000 spent annually. And to understand how ridiculous these numbers are, let's take a look at my home state of California, where infant care is said to eat up 62.7% of minimum wage incomes. Because childcare is becoming increasingly unattainable, parents are continuously pushed into a tough position, having to choose between staying in the workforce and being there to take care of their children. As a result, they are forced to delegate tasks within the household, oftentimes a large brunt of this responsibility falling on older children. And so the eldest child grows up and becomes the new caretaker of the home. And as someone who has taken that on, let me tell you, it can get pretty awkward. I mean, my little brothers refuse to believe that I'm, in fact, still a child. They claim it's because I do fun adult things like drink soda and tie my own shoes. But it goes so much deeper than that. Parentification disrupts childhood by placing adult responsibilities onto children. Newport Academy identifies 2 distinct types of parentification: instrumental and emotional. Instrumental parentification occurs when a child takes on practical tasks. This can be things like grocery shopping and cooking, taking care of other children or an infant in the home, or even serving as the family's translator in environments like the bank or the doctor's office. But for our sake, it's important to understand that instrumental parentification is not equivalent to helping with a favor or taking on an extra chore. Because these tasks are frequent and often age inappropriate, they leave the child with less time to engage in typical childhood activities that can aid their development. On the other hand, emotional parentification occurs when a child provides emotional support for a caretaker in a way that blurs the traditional child-parent dynamic. This is most commonly seen when a child listens to their parents' problems and provides them with advice. But in its extreme, can extend to a child acting as a moderator between their caretakers in times of conflict. And as you can imagine, the content of these conversations is often too overwhelming for the child to handle or too mature for them to even understand. And the effects of parentification go far beyond the household, with many people like myself struggling to balance all of these household responsibilities with something as vital as our education. Thankfully, institutions have begun to recognize the effects that these added responsibilities have on adolescents. For example, Rhode Island has become a pioneer in aiding their parentified students by creating legislation that identifies them. The state mandates collection data of child care responsibilities within high school populations and provides these students with targeted support for their unique circumstances. The Rhode Island Department of Education affirms that schools must recognize caretaking as a significant obstacle to traditional student success and recognize these responsibilities while providing concrete solutions. In Rhode Island, this looks like flexible attendance policies, easier access to tutoring, and more abundant counseling services for the unique emotional and academic needs of parentified children. And when they begin to look towards higher education, the Common Application, an undergraduate college admission system, is also taking steps towards aiding prospective students. The site now allows you to list taking care of family members as an activity on your portfolio that you can submit to colleges. This allows schools to have a better understanding as to how you spend your time, as well as more context towards the rest of your application, as they now know that you are balancing caretaking and schoolwork. But I'll admit, that balance wasn't exactly something that came easy to me when my brothers were born. Because I mean, hey, learning all of the names of the characters in Bluey takes time, so I'm surprised I even made it here today. And after building many Star Wars Lego sets, I began to realize that I've neglected to build some things of my own. Connections. According to an article from Psychology Today, formerly parentified children struggle with boundary setting and emotional regulation because they grew up constantly focused on meeting the physical and emotional needs of other people. So when they begin to meet people outside of their household, they adopt their caretaker mentality and apply it to future relationships. This can result in two common struggles. The first is a difficulty in distinguishing the difference between their needs and their partners. This is because when they are constantly focused on the feelings of another person, they begin to neglect their own and see themselves as less than. But this confusion can also be seen in reverse, with the parentified child struggling to place any emotional stock into a new person. This is because they grew up in an environment where emotional support was either inconsistent or fully non-existent. This innate fear of vulnerability can leave them feeling isolated and having difficulty in making meaningful connections. But hey, don't let that make you think that my life is all sad and gloomy, because it isn't. In fact, I have two little rays of sunshine following me around every day. My little brothers, Grayson and Jet, were born during COVID-19. And I'll admit, having two screaming babies in the house while going to school over Zoom, not exactly an ideal learning environment. But as psychologist Dr. Lisa Fontes explains, parentified children who focus on their siblings are more likely to form strong protective bonds that last a lifetime. So even though I have to deal with the tantrums, taking care of them has given my life a purpose. They became the reason that I wake up every morning and aspire to be the best version of myself. And I think that anyone who has a little one in their life will understand how they change perspective. So yes, I did and still do struggle with fitting into my complex role. But I and many others have found the motivation to not only persevere, but to cherish these moments. So that one day, my little boys will look up to me not as mom number two, but as a loving and supportive big sister. So today, we discovered why parentification exists, then its effects on an individual's childhood, before finally, what that means for the parentified child when forming connections. Parentification inherently affects childhood development. But at the end of the day, whether it's a funny-shaped cloud, a new Bluey episode, or a bedtime story, my little boys challenge me to see joy in the little things. And after our time together today, for their sake and for mine, I hope we have finally answered the question, Are you my mother?
Our third speaker is code 4100. The title of the speech, To the Window, to the Wall.
This past fall, I spent a semester abroad in Spain, best known for classifying ham as an essential food group, being really confused when someone identified as a non-Catholic, non-pork eater, and for having a legal drinking age of 18. As an exchange student, I attended a school that was basically a historical landmark with a central courtyard, natural light, and fresh air. It was literally a serotonin boost. But don't quote me on that. I'm no expert on hormones. My school in the US looks and feels a bit different. We are infamous for our Cold War era bunker, sterile white walls, and our exploding toilets. I wish that was two truths and a lie. Our campuses aren't the only thing crumbling. An article from the American Psychological Association opens with a sobering refrain. America's students are falling behind. According to the most recent data from the Program for International Student Assessment, US students ranked 9th in reading, 12th in science, and 34th in math. Now, before we whip them out and start measuring our international dictionaries, it's important to understand that these rankings are exacerbated by mental health issues, behavioral challenges, and teachers leaving the field. To put it very gently, other countries are kicking our assessments. It's true, we've made progress with hands-on learning, empathetic discipline, and innovative curriculums. But maybe we're looking for solutions in the wrong place, and it's time we shift our focus to the architecture of our schools. Research shows that unless this happens, cutting-edge approaches to learning cannot produce the needed outcomes. By reimagining 4 elements of our academic spaces: light, adaptability, accessibility, and safety. We can harness a vital tool in our collective attempt to fix a broken system. For me, one benefit of going to school here in the US is the lack of windows in a lot of our classrooms. Absolutely nothing is worse than being hungover in a well-lit room. Or so I've been told. Similarly, the teens of the dry 1920s also abided by the laws of our country. So they didn't mind when school was made compulsory and blueprints began to reflect a focus on daylight. Professor of Architecture Dale Allen Geyer says that a general guideline was established that the windows would be a quarter of the floor area. Subsequently, buildings shaped like the letters E, U, and H became popular in order to maximize exposure to sunlight. At the same time, new construction was modeled after symbols of freedom and equality, like Denver East, inspired by Independence Hall in Philadelphia with its tall windows and optimal light. A report from the National Clearinghouse for Educational Facilities found that students with the most natural light outperformed others by 20% in math and 26% in reading. Sadly, portions of the beautiful windows at Denver East have been boarded over to comply with modern mechanical code, dimming the brightness of the original architect's intentions and the potential educational outcomes of its inhabitants. Now, considering their school's speech and debate team is my school's rivals, I would not be that concerned. But it's not just them. When surveyed by EdWeek's Research Center, 1 in 5 teachers said that their classrooms had no natural light whatsoever. Those are some dark statistics. Most of our current high schools were constructed post-World War II, when Americans got twice as horny and made 3 times as many babies that became students. School districts dealt with these hooligans using cookie-cutter designs that lacked adaptability. Built quickly with a one-size-fits-all approach, the brutalist flat-roof fallout shelter, high school, was born. Take my school, for example. Desks that faced forward, chalkboards that dominated the room, and classrooms in long hallways far from common spaces. The expectation was that students, no matter their race, class, or unique struggles, all learned the same way, by sitting and listening. Yet, research from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development highlights the positive impact of collaborative learning on critical thinking and problem-solving skills. My APUS teacher once abandoned her War of 1812 lecture for a class-wide Twitter battle between James Madison and King George. Solid idea in theory, but in execution, moving heavy tables to facilitate small groups resulted in multiple battle wounds. Edutopia, a foundation that encourages innovation in K-12 schools, suggests a few ideas. Hallways can become extensions of our classrooms, and walls can act as writing surfaces for students. I'm talking outside of bathroom stalls. Mobile furnishings, such as light chairs and wheeled tables, allow for instructional variety, including independent work, group work, and safe historical diss track battles. Suck it, King George. Looking back at the beginning of US education, we have the one-room schoolhouse, and our first example of a gender-neutral bathroom, the outhouse. And after 9 books and a TV series, we didn't hear Laura Ingalls Wilder complain about it once. I lie. Conversely, modern American schools focus on compartmentalizing. Academics from administration, and support services from shared spaces. Recently, I interviewed Adam Kohler of World Savvy. He said, which aims to inspire inclusive and relevant education. He said that the physical spaces of our schools can make our goals difficult, if not impossible. He then went on to praise New Zealand's Universal Design for Learning. The UDL is a framework for infrastructure that represents and accommodates a diverse student body. American schools focus on compartmentalizing. The UDL would support placing counseling centers in central, high-trafficked areas. New York Psychotherapy and Counseling Center proves that making mental health services visible boosts access, ensures follow-up, and helps reduce stigma. Next, bathrooms should be reconfigured into gender-inclusive individual toilet rooms with a shared space for sinks, full-length doors, and multiple entry points to increase safety. Research from the Australian government has shown this model to reduce stigmatization for certain students while maintaining privacy for all. Finally, we should intentionally incorporate non-educational resources focused on basic needs. According to the National Institute of Health, food insecurity negatively impacts a student's ability to focus, learn, and achieve in the classroom. Resources like food pantries remove this barrier and allow students to thrive academically. Being from Colorado, the #1 question I got asked when I was in Spain was, "Fumas marijuana?" Not something I will be addressing today. The #2 question, do school shootings actually happen? Yes. I shared how metal detectors, lockdown drills, and anxiety have become normal parts of our everyday lives. The Education Resources Center found that students who felt unsafe in the classroom had higher absences and lower scores on standardized tests. Yet, the pendulum swing to focus solely on limiting access to our schools is nearsighted. Following the shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, Senator and amateur architect Ted Cruz suggested that we have an armed guard at the sole entrance into the school. That idea comes from a conceptual prison design known as the panopticon, where the guards could see out in all directions, but the prisoners' perception was warped, creating the illusion that they were constantly being surveilled. This belief is what controlled the prisoners' actions at all times. Really, Ted? Rather than putting the lives of children ahead of the gun lobby, we are redesigning schools into closed-off, fear-inducing fortresses. Students and teachers alike have the right to feel safe without feeling subjugated. But why is our answer to this vastly complicated problem to handcuff the learning process in the very place where ingenuity and free expression should not be shackled? A school designed like a prison isn't guaranteed to prevent school shootings. But a school designed to be well-lit, adaptable, and accommodating can help ensure students thrive, and in doing so, decrease the chances of future tragedy. All right, I'll address the elephant in the room. I'm a privileged white girl who got to study abroad in Spain. So yeah, it's very easy for me to stand here and yuck the US's figurative yum, but it doesn't mean I'm wrong. In retrospect, my time in Spain has converted me to the idea that reevaluating our educational architecture is the first step in revolutionizing US public education. My time in Spain may have also converted me to Catholicism, at least to this one guy who turns water into wine. Yeah, I can see.
Our fourth speaker is code 4078. The title of the speech, An Outing with Elphaba.
This year, we've watched women reach new heights. Most recently, Diana Ross ascended the Met Gala steps. Katy Perry launched into space and back, and Elphaba started it all when she flew off the handle and took her big leap. And if you haven't seen this cinematic masterpiece first, and second, it was the most religious experience I've had since Martha Stewart signed my cookbook. Without a doubt, the most transformational moment came when Elphaba was outed as a witch and belted an F5. I mean, I felt like how Hillary Clinton must have felt when pantsuits were invented. As a friend of Dorothy's, I found this reaction deeply spiritual, as every time I've been outed, I too have defied gravity right out of a palace window. The unfortunate reality for those outed as witches or other identities is that there isn't always a magic broom to ride off on. Journalist Ryan Adam Chesky defines outing as the act of revealing someone's sexual orientation or gender identity without their consent. Outing, like Wicked, has fundamentally shaped the individual lives and collective community of gay people. So today, let's trace how outing has shaped the gay community, unpack how it became a political weapon and a tool for social change, before looking at the current implications facing LGBTQ+ youth today. Outing existed long before Elphaba donned that hideous hat, even if it hasn't always been termed outing. In the 1930s, people relied on code phrases, such as family, a club member, or a friend of Dorothy's, to come out in areas of mixed company. Fears of being outed were made real via the largest outing in US history, perpetuated by the US government, according to Warren Johanson in his book, Outing, Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence. While the military didn't find it necessary to screen recruits in World War I, World War II was a different story. According to Forces News, during the draft, gay men would be registered unfit to serve for reasons based on moral fitness. Beyond the initial screening, many soldiers would be outed while serving. This process involved interrogations, solitary confinement, or time in military prisons, sometimes referred to as queer stockades. I mean, don't threaten me with a good time. Being blue discharged got its name from the color of the paper the discharge was on, and was accompanied by the letter H stamped on it for homosexual, outing them to the world. Because these discharge papers would be required by any employer, banker, or doctor, the H on their papers followed them everywhere, at a time when sodomy was a felony in every state. However, outing also inadvertently helped shape blossoming parts of gay communities. According to Solsire Berga of Time magazine, many discharged from the military stayed behind in port cities rather than return home in disgrace. Because of this, San Francisco inherited a community of gay men who had blue discharge papers, so there was no point in hiding anymore. They often settled in these cities to escape small-town stigma, leading to the development of gayborhoods, which also just happens to be what I call the boys' locker room at my high school. Gayborhoods were areas across the country where outed members of the queer community came together to be accepted. According to Daniel Baldwin Hess, in his book, The Life and Afterlife of Gay Neighborhoods, these neighborhoods became a respite from the critical and shunning eye of mainstream society that many had faced after being outed in their hometowns. These areas still exist and thrive across the country, in places like New Orleans, Philadelphia, and Chicago. Ultimately, while outing has inadvertently benefited the community in some ways, historically it was used as a tool to silence or disgrace individuals. Outing was most prolifically wielded as a political weapon in the Lavender Scare. Senator Joe McCarthy, the 1950s version of the Wizard, targeted gay government employees for having weak moral character, mirroring the rhetoric of blue discharges. Surprisingly, the onset of the AIDS epidemic caused members of the queer community to use outing, or what they called queer self-defense, as a tool for social change in two main ways. The first way was to shed light on the hypocrisy of those who actively worked against the community while secretly being a part of it. At the time, there was somewhat of a consensus about these practices. A survey published by Outlook in 1990 revealed that 69% favored outing officials who obstruct the fight against AIDS, and 73% favored outing government officials who perpetuate homophobia and obstruct gay and lesbian rights. The second and more controversial way the community used outing was to out prominent individuals who could bring positive recognition to the community. Author Larry Gross explains the organization Queer Nation transformed singer Katie Lang's Gap campaign into an outing by covering the P in the campaign's bus ads with a Y. And celebrity outings have brought positive recognition to the community, as demonstrated by the outing of George Michael, and more recently of actor Kit Connor, as well as music artist Khalid, outed by an ex-boyfriend on social media. Yet recent advancements in technology complicate matters. Oh, in Gallup's online hate report, 34% of those surveyed revealed that, like Khalid, they were outed on social media. Recently, Swiss psychiatrists proffered an AI model that can differentiate between straight and gay men with 83% accuracy. Critics warn that this type of technology will inevitably be used as a tool of surveillance and repression. Ultimately, advancements in AI greatly amplify the scale on which these attacks can be launched by both individuals and officials. Due to increased tolerance, outing is now much more likely to impact the most vulnerable, LGBTQ+ youth. Currently, 15 states have laws that require transgender students to be outed, most prominently Florida, or as they would pronounce it, Fluja, because they can't read. Most prolifically, the Parental Rights and Education Bill, better known as the Don't Say Gay Bill, requires principals to out students to their parents. Yet progressive states are also taking actions to prevent outing. In July of 2024, California advanced the SAFETY Act, which prohibits schools from automatically notifying families about a student's gender orientation or sexuality. However, recent actions taken by the Trump administration indicate that this issue will only continue to escalate. In an article published in March 2025, Politico explains that Trump is threatening to pull funding while launching an investigation into the bill, arguing that the law violates parents' rights. However, this rhetoric of outing children all in the name of parents' rights puts kids into direct danger. The story of high school football player Marcus Wayman from the rural small town of Minersville best illustrates the human cost of outing. According to the Cornell Law Review, just hours after authorities threatened to out him to his family, he tragically shot himself. His mother sued the city for violating her son's privacy, demonstrating that while some parents prioritize their rights over their child's safety, not all do. Predictably, students most concerned about being outed are those with the least support at home. According to a 2023 study by the University of Connecticut, 1/3 of LGBTQ+ youth outed to their families were more likely to report major symptoms of depression than those who weren't. The University of Connecticut also explains that 44% of LGBTQ+ youth have not reported harassment to an adult at school out of fear their parents would learn their identity. Larry Dupuy, legal director of the ACLU of Wisconsin, stated, "This was never about the rights of the parents. It was manufactured by those who play off the fear and ignorance about gender and sexuality, and who would risk the safety of students to advance their ideology." He explains that students should be allowed to explore and disclose their identities on their own terms. So today, we explored how outing has fundamentally shaped the individual lives and collective community of gay people. However, we have had the privilege of viewing this topic from a distance. But for me, my friends, and queer kids everywhere that don't have a magic broomstick to ride off on, there's no flying away from this. So while it is hard to say if the legacy of outing has changed the world for the better, I think we can all agree it has changed it for good.
Our fifth speaker is code 4079. The title of the speech, All In.
My life has been a series of befores and afters. Before I joined speech, after I joined speech, before I joined info, after I joined info. But perhaps the most influential to both me and my bank account, before I started gambling, and after I started gambling, baby! I'm so broke. And not alone, because for kids my age, The daily bets, picks, and props have become more than just an innocent aside. According to a 2021 NIH report, nearly 80% of 13 to 17-year-olds have gambled at least once in the last year. And ever since the 2018 Supreme Court ruling against the NCAA, lifting the federal ban for online sports betting, access has exploded. And in the 7 years following, destination gaming is no longer a place. It's in our pockets. Perhaps that is why Dr. Adam Goody, head of psychology at the University of Georgia, calls gambling a severe addiction problem, on par with alcohol and drug abuse. It is time we go all in on gambling. And first, roll with our nation's obsession. Then, check its pervasiveness before finally dealing with its implications for both adults and children. Okay, while I might have spent my entire life savings on online gambling, I also learned a valuable lesson that just like LeBron's hamstring when I needed over 30 from him, the pull of gambling is nearly inescapable. And as it turns out, it's highly addictive. According to the Journal of Neuropsychiatry and Clinical Neurosciences, it works a lot like other addictive substances, starting with the ace of hormones, mesolimbic dopamine. Only the quick-win nature of gambling initiates a dopamine tsunami, flooding our brains with an instant positive reward that leaves us positively craving more. The study furthers that gambling addicts share the same core features as substance addiction: intense craving, withdrawal, compulsion. Today, according to the National Council on Problem Gambling, nearly 8 million Americans have a gambling addiction. Shocking, but perhaps not surprising, because their vice is everywhere, and it's spreading fast. According to a 2024 Social Science Research Network report, 38 states have already legalized online gambling, generating over $300 billion in wagers. I mean, just here in Iowa alone, $2.7 billion were wagered last year. And there hasn't been a professional game here since the Field of Dreams. And last February, over 68 million Americans bet over $23 billion on the Super Bowl. Personally, I hammered the over on how many times my stepdad would complain about seeing Taylor Swift on the screen. He's a Minnesota Vikings fan. He doesn't really know what to do when there's a winner on the screen. The NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL are ALL, all sponsored by major online betting companies. And as the stakes are raised, it's often the athletes who start to pay the price. Because as The Athletic reports earlier this year, with legalized gambling so accessible that people can bet from anywhere, including in arenas during games, that athletes are now the prime target for abuse. New York Knicks guard Josh Hart says that he receives constant hate messages online, many using racial slurs and threatening injury. Detroit Pistons center Isaiah Stewart says that these online attacks are often aimed at his wife and infant son. And college basketball player Armando Bacot says that he received death threats for not getting enough rebounds in a college basketball game. And as female sports rise in popularity, so too does the gender disparity between these abusive posts. An NCAA study from last October finds that female athletes received 59% more abusive messages than the men, despite men's sports garnering far more wagering. And earlier this month at a Philadelphia track meet, 3-time Olympic gold medalist Gabby Thomas was repeatedly heckled and followed around the track by a fan who had a $1,000 bet that she would lose, calling her a choke artist and shouting several personal insults. She finished in 4th, and he cashed in nearly $1,900. And on the other side of this chip, fans aren't the only ones placing bets. Ivan Toney, a professional soccer player, was banned for 8 months after violating the Premier League's online gambling policies. Turns out his bets were that he himself would score. He bet $10,000 15 times. But I mean, why wouldn't he? Over half the league's teams have a sports betting logo on their jerseys or printed on the pitch, and TV viewers were shown nearly 7,000 gambling advertisements in the season's opening weekend alone. And it's not just soccer. Take a random Toronto-Chicago NBA game from 2023. The advertising is everywhere. CBC Canada in 2024 reports that viewers saw gambling advertisements for 40% of this entire game. And of those advertisements, only a fifth were accompanied by a message supporting safer gambling. Gamble responsibly. From our feeds to our fields, gambling has become so pervasive that it has flooded our screens. I mean, the app alerts alone are incessant. DraftKings. You bet 5, get 150 instantly. FanDuel. Bet 5, get 250 if your bet wins. And BetMGM. Get up to $1,000 in free play if your bet loses. And when we linger on one ad just a little bit too long, the algorithm only pumps out more. It's no wonder people fall for the allure of these quick hit schemes. I mean, you throw in a dopamine rush on steroids, and we're left with what BMC Public Health in 2023 calls a virus. One that seems directly aimed at kids. Because as the Minnesota Alliance for Problem Gambling reports in 2024, 60% of high schoolers have gambled for money in the last year, up to 14% of adolescents are at risk for a gambling addiction, and 6% already have one. 3 times the adult prevalence rate. And while explanations behind these sobering statistics are complex, one answer may lie in so-called gateway games. Low-level gambling where the risk is minimal, but the dopamine rush is just as significant. Commonly and cleverly embedded in various video games, roulette wheels, mystery packs, and loot boxes offer the allure of winning big, but just like at a real casino, the odds heavily favor the house. To the tune of $300 million of loss in 2024 alone. And according to the Safer Online Gambling Group, the majority of these losses come from children as young as the age of 11. And the biggest gateway, no doubt, a free-to-play social sportsbook called Fliff. To play, users buy Fliff coins, bought with real coin, 99 cents to $99 at a time. And beyond its 1.4 million downloads in 2024 alone, its CEO, Matt Ricci, calls it an introductory tool to the sports curious. But the similarities between this and a real sports book are striking. As Adam Kilgore writes for the Washington Post last March, we've put the most addictive behavior on the most addictive device. What could go wrong? Which brings me back home. Later this year, my home state of Minnesota is poised to become the 39th state to fully legalize sports betting. Proponents point to the fact that gambling was still happening. This just regulates it. And yet, the realities of even a regulated betting market can be severe. A 2023 UCLA survey finds that states with legalized gambling trend towards a 9% increase in auto loan delinquencies, a lower average credit score, and a 27% spike in household bankruptcies. And the most alarming, a University of Oregon study that finds when a home team expected to win then loses in an upset, intimate partner violence rises by 10%, which leaves lawmakers with the question, is this a bet worth the risk? Okay, it's truth time. The before and after images may have had some lies sprinkled in. Not this one. But this whole getup, obviously fake. I mean, guys, I'm not even 18. I can't even bet legally. But here's what I can do. After reviewing our gambling obsession, aggression, and regression, I may not be the high roller that I claim, but I, and maybe you all now too, sure know when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em.
Our sixth speaker is code 4040. The title of the speech, Live and Info Color.
Before I begin, I'd like to dedicate this moment to my maman. You might not be here to see me, but I hope you'd be proud. School Picture Day strikes fear into children across America, with worries about bad hair, acne, and a host of other appearance concerns. For me, though, I worry that I'm gonna look like a sleep paralysis demon. Again. All teeth, literally no other defining features. Comedian Josh Johnson says you know a white person's a real ally when they turn the flash on for photos. Y'all end up looking like the ghost of Christmas past, but at least I look nice. The people in charge of the school ID photos, not allies. And although ID photos may not seem like the most impactful informative topic, my experience is actually symptomatic of a much larger issue, colorism, particularly in photography. As Harvard professor Sarah Lewis notes, the right to be recognized justly has become intrinsically tied to public images and representation. But due to obstacles within photography itself, this right is largely kept from those of darker complexions. So today, let's talk about colorism in photography, by first focusing our lens on the past of photographic colorism, then capturing colorism in modern photography, before finally exposing the dark impacts that colorism in photography can have. But before we can delve into colorism within photography, we first have to understand what colorism even is. I mean, colorism sounds like systemic prejudice within the Crayola world, which would be the only place where white is the color we discriminate against. But in the real world, author Alice Walker, in her collection, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, coined the term colorism as prejudicial treatment of individuals based solely on skin tone, often favoring people with lighter skin over those with darker skin. And the white crayon lives to see another day. These biases became ingrained into our culture and crept their way into our inventions, like cameras, And we were doomed from the start. Because, as Concordia University professor Lorna Roth states, colored film did not include photosensitive chemicals that brought out red, brown, and yellow tones, common undertones of those with darker complexions, leaving them looking muddy and not distinct. But, just like my therapist says in my mental health, chemicals aren't the only problem. Cameras were also calibrated this way. In their article, The Photograph Details of a Dark Horse in Low Light, Aperture reports that Kodak distributed Shirley cards, photos of model Shirley Page, in order to calibrate cameras to capture facial features correctly. Now, I want everyone to take a moment and imagine a woman named Shirley. Yeah, you see the problem. Calibrating cameras this way ensured that they had a hard time capturing dark skin tones. This created pushback from Black Americans, which was immediately heard and corrected because camera developers took our concerns seriously. Yeah, no, but it's fun to make believe. In reality, despite pushback from Black Americans, colored film did not take this issue seriously until two of Kodak's biggest clients, furniture and chocolate manufacturers, voiced concerns that commercial photography didn't accurately capture the dark brown tones of their products. Yeah, Willy Wonka didn't care how the Oompa Loompas looked as long as the chocolate looked scrumptious. To remedy these concerns, in 1995, Kodak released their multiracial Shirley card, or as I like to call it, their 90s racial diversity card, which helped film better represent brown tones. These changes were welcome and a step in the right direction. But digital photography and the modern age would render them obsolete and bring a whole new host of problems for capturing color. Many of these issues originate within our smartphones. In an effort to understand why smartphone cameras seem to struggle so much to capture dark skin, Google image equity lead Florian Koensberger explains that many cameras, editing tools, and algorithms were largely trained on fair-skinned individuals. Huh, would you look at that? It would seem we haven't learned that much after all. But colorism's impacts in modern photography are beginning to expand far beyond just skin tone. A Snapchat spokesperson stated that over 200 million people use beauty filters to augment themselves and the world around them daily, many of which narrow the face, make eyes appear more blue, and lighten the skin. Journalist Shanakani Dulazzi demonstrated this in her article, Let's Be Honest, Snapchat filters are a little bit racist, by showing how her face looked with no filter, and then with a filter that is just supposed to add a flower crown to the user, stating that these filters have become the new bleach. Ronald Hall, a skin color expert, says this is purposeful and intended to uphold Eurocentric ideas that lighter skin and beautiful skin are synonymous. But these biases aren't just ingrained in the technology itself. They're also ingrained in our photographers. Take, for example, the cover of Time magazine in June 1994, in which illustrator Matt Mahurin darkened Simpson's mugshot for, as he says, a more dramatic tone. But as Tate Ryan Mosley writes for the MIT Technology Review, this editing reflected that the darker the man, the more criminal the American public assumes him to be. But this isn't just a problem of darkening skin either. Magazine photographers will often lighten dark-skinned models in an effort to make them more beautiful, lightening the skin of undeniably beautiful women such as Lupita Nyong'o, Naomi Campbell, and even Beyonce, shows that our society believes that beauty and dark skin cannot coexist. They lighten our glamour shots, yet darken our mugshots. The impacts of this are clear. But it's not just prejudiced police and Hollywood elites. Colorism's impacts in photography extend far beyond the camera, with staggering implications for the lives of people with dark skin. Writer Helena Vieira reports that many dark-skinned workers are often advised to remove their photos from job applications, with a job study conducted by the University of Georgia finding that lighter-skinned men are seen as significantly more appealing than darker-skinned men, even when they are the more qualified applicant. Furthermore, founder of Chudnovsky Law, Tyson Chudnovsky, warns against the practice of darkening mugshots before trial, a practice that the New York Times reports is not illegal in any state, but can have far-reaching implications considering dark-skinned defendants are more likely to receive higher sentences. This issue has even permeated into the medical field, with doctors in the British Journal of Dermatology reporting that due to the lack of quality photos for dark-skinned people, doctors have a harder time diagnosing dark-skinned patients, which only adds to their already heightened mortality rates. But the worst part is that we have the tools to address these issues. For 99% Invisible, Roman Mars pointed out that techniques like lighting and staging can be used to circumvent these issues. In fact, photographer Ade Ozunubi demonstrated this in her photo series, Skin, where she showed that if a photographer simply cares enough, even those with the darkest of skin tones can be accurately captured on cameras. And yet, while watching NSDA, Nationals videos, there are years in which I am confronted with the fact that for every fair-skinned speaker captured in perfect clarity, there are a dozen more dark-skinned speakers who I can barely make out the faces of. Cameras can capture qualities in dark color, but only if it is the priority of the institutions operating the equipment. And some years, even in one of the most progressive spaces accessible to my age group, it is so clearly not. And so, to the NSDA, we should never be able to see suits in higher quality than we can see ourselves. Today, we went over the past of colorism in photography, explored its modern manifestations before finally uncovering the biases, the impact this can have on individuals. But there have been flashes of hope. More and more dark-skinned photographers are taking up the task to create photos that beautifully capture the dark skin of their models, widening the representation for dark-skinned models one image at a time. And I've begun to see some of these changes in my own life, because the people who took the school ID photos this year, real allies. Now, whenever I see my ID, I know the rest of the world finally sees me how I see myself, in full clarity, both dark and beautiful.